The most beloved Christmas movie ever made was filmed by a broken man who just returned from war. James Stewart, 20 combat missions over Germany, watched his men die, lost 30 pounds, couldn't sleep, nightmares every night. Hollywood told him, smile, act, pretend the war never happened. But there was one scene he couldn't fake. George Bailey on a bridge, screaming into the snow, "I want to live again!" That wasn't acting. That was Colonel James Stewart breaking, for real, and nobody knew. In 1941, James Stewart was already a star. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, the Philadelphia story, America's favorite leading man. He could have stayed home during World War II, made propaganda films from safety. That's what most stars did. But 9 months before Pearl Harbor, Stewart enlisted in the Army Air Corps. He wanted to fight, to fly, to serve. He was the first major Hollywood star to join combat. The studios were furious. You're throwing away your career. Stewart didn't care. The Army sent him to England, made him a B-24 bomber pilot, put him in command of 10 men. B-24 Liberators flew deep into Germany, through anti-aircraft fire so thick it looked like clouds, German fighters attacking from every angle. Every mission was Russian roulette. You might come back, you might not. Stewart flew 20 official combat missions, but he often flew more, uncredited, just to be with his men, to share the danger. He watched planes explode next to him, friends dying, men screaming as their bombers fell. He was promoted to colonel, led entire bombing groups, made decisions that kept hundreds alive or got them killed. Every mission, some men didn't come back, and Stewart had to write letters to their mothers, their wives, explaining why their sons weren't coming home. The guilt crushed him. When the war ended in 1945, Colonel James Stewart came home. The newspapers celebrated. War hero returns to Hollywood. But the man who came back wasn't the same man. He'd lost 30 pounds, face gaunt, eyes haunted, couldn't sleep, nightmares, planes exploding, men screaming. What we call PTSD today, they called battle fatigue then. The treatment, don't talk about it, move on, be a man. Hollywood wanted the old Jimmy Stewart back, the charm, the smile, the everyman hero. But Stewart couldn't do it. "I don't know if I can act anymore," he told his agent. "I don't feel anything." Then Frank Capra called. Capra had also served in the war, made Army documentaries. He understood what Stewart was carrying, the brotherhood of veterans. Capra was making a film, It's a Wonderful Life, about George Bailey, a man who sacrifices everything for everyone else, who reaches his breaking point, who contemplates suicide on Christmas Eve. Stewart read the script. It was too close, too real. "I don't know if I can do this, Frank." "Don't act," said Capra. "Just be." Filming began in 1946. Stewart showed up carrying all his trauma, the nightmares, the guilt, the feeling he'd lost himself over Germany. The early scenes were easy. Young George Bailey, full of dreams. Stewart could fake that. But as George Bailey's life collapsed, as the weight of responsibility crushed him, Stewart didn't have to fake anything. The scene in Martini's bar, George at his lowest, everything falling apart. He makes a desperate prayer, voice barely a whisper, then breaks into sobs. All of Stewart's pain poured out, the terror, the guilt, the men who died under his command. And then the bridge scene. Christmas Eve, snow falling, George Bailey ready to jump. Clarence, the angel, shows him a world where he was never born, everyone he saved dead, every life he touched destroyed. George understands. He wants to live. When Capra called action, Stewart stood in the artificial snow, and something inside him shattered completely. "I want to live again," he screamed. "Please, God, let me live again." It wasn't George Bailey. It was Colonel James Stewart, the pilot who'd flown through hell, the commander who'd lost men, the veteran who didn't know how to be himself anymore, the man who wanted to find his way back to life. Capra kept rolling. The crew stood silent. This wasn't acting. This was real. It's a Wonderful Life was released December 1946. It flopped. Audiences didn't want dark films about suicide at Christmas. The film lost money. Stewart moved on, kept making films, continued serving in the Air Force Reserve, eventually became Brigadier General. But he never spoke about the war, never explained what he'd brought to George Bailey. For decades, the film was forgotten. Then, the 1970s, the copyright lapsed. TV stations could air it free, so they did, every Christmas. And people started watching, really watching. They saw something in Stewart's performance, something real, something beyond acting. The film became a classic, the most beloved Christmas movie ever made. But almost nobody knew the truth, that the breakdown on the bridge wasn't acting, that the desperation was real, that Colonel James Stewart had been crying out for his own life. Stewart died in 1997, 89 years old. He never spoke publicly about his war trauma, but he gave us George Bailey, a broken man who finds his way back, who learns his life mattered. And maybe playing George Bailey helped Stewart find his way back too. When you watch It's a Wonderful Life this Christmas, when you see George Bailey on that bridge screaming to live again, remember James Stewart, the B-24 pilot, the colonel, the brigadier general, the man who flew 20 combat missions and more, who watched his men die, who came home broken. Hollywood told him to pretend nothing happened. But Frank Capra, a fellow veteran, gave him a role where he could break, where he could feel, where he could be honest. And in that moment, Colonel James Stewart gave us something real, something that's touched millions for 75 years. Behind George Bailey was a war hero nobody thanked properly. Behind the most hopeful film ever made was a veteran struggling to find hope. Behind the performance that makes us cry was a man who needed to cry and finally could. That is Brigadier General James Stewart, the pilot, the commander, the veteran who carried the weight of war. His service didn't end when the war did. It continued every time he stood in front of a camera, giving us performances that felt heartbreakingly real, because they were real. George Bailey's breakdown saved his life, and James Stewart's pain gave us a gift that keeps giving. Every Christmas, every time someone watches and remembers that life is worth living. Thank you, General Stewart, for your service, your sacrifice, your honesty. You gave us permission to break, to struggle, to find our way back. And that's wonderful. That's truly wonderful.